Some of you from a certain era may recall when Steve Martin was a very funny guy and actually made very funny movies. In the 1979 film The Jerk, Martin's character of Navin Johnson gave new meaning to excitement over what some of us might consider to be nothing more than a humdrum, everyday occurrence.
Thank you.
Well, I wish I could get that excited about
nothing. Are you kidding? Page 73, Johnson, Navin, R. I'm somebody now. Millions of people look at this book every day. This is the kind of spontaneous publicity, your name in print, that makes people. I'm in print. Things are going to start happening to me now.
That is exactly what happens now when certain people and their followers see their name in a certain form of print that screams to the world, I'm somebody, I'm notable, I have the power, and all for the whopping time period of maybe, 17 seconds? That's the time it usually takes for one poll to emerge and another to be issued that renders the first set of numbers completely useless and drives us all right back to where we were in the first place. Why should we trust anything these polls tell us? I mean, after all, at least the phone book you knew you could trust, right? We can trust you to be part of this conversation. Get on the line right now. Answer a simple question for me. Do you trust the polls? Why or why not? 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Let's turn the pages now and do this in honor of Navin Johnson. Welcome the CEO at Edgeworth Economics and the co-author of the book EVERYDATA, the misinformation hidden in the little data you consume every day. Dr. John Johnson joins us on the show. All right, Dr. Johnson, we're not going to talk about the phone book here, but look, the analogy I think is pretty perfect because here we have polls every day that tell Hillary Clinton she's leading, Donald Trump she's leading, that this issue is important, this issue is unimportant, and within seconds we have another poll that tells us, that's not the case. Go ahead. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. How are we supposed to pick through all of these numbers and decide which ones are right, which ones are wrong, and which ones are just there for giggles and grins?
Well, it is very confusing. There are so many different numbers, and it almost multiplies like bunnies that you see on a daily basis, the latest polls. So what I like to tell people to do is you have to step back and think. The first thing that is very important is to not overread any single poll. People love to create narratives around the latest numbers from today, and you saw headlines that said things like Trump's support plummets, or you might see stories about, in light of the Benghazi report, the latest polls show Hillary plummeting. Many times, we try to create these stories that really the numbers don't support. So I don't think we want to throw all the numbers out. That would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I do think sort of being careful and cautious about what we interpret or over-interpreting them is really the key.
But here's exactly to your point then. A new poll from Quinnipiac has Donald Trump closing in on Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, the news that came out today was a literal dead heat between the two candidates. Okay. Now, if you look at other national polls and some of the numbers here, on average, Hillary Clinton holds over a 6-point advantage over Donald Trump. I've got sitting in my hands right here, let's see, I've got Ballotpedia poll saying Clinton leads Trump in 7 swing states. I've got the Fairleigh Dickinson University Public Mind poll showing Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump by 21 points in New Jersey, 52 to 31%. Isn't that the biggest problem, though? And let me talk about exactly what you said here. We look at the headline, we see that one-line note, we don't dig into the meat of the poll to tell us where and how it was taken. Yes?
That's absolutely right. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of narratives that get created, and each poll, one thing you have to be aware of is state polls are historically less reliable than national polls. Less money to run them, less careful what we call sampling. Every poll can be dramatically influenced by who are the people that are questioned, whether there's more people who answer telephone polls versus on the internet. There's a lot of things like that that go on, and so when you actually look at the details, you can often see things that will swing it. For example, one very big issue this year is going to be the presence of potential independent candidates. In many of these polls, when you see names like Gary Johnson included, you see big swings in the results, or at least a narrowing of these differences between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So these types of things where how the questions are asked Are they asked after a series of particularly negative questions about one side or the other? All of these things actually do shape what the answer is. And so to go and put a lot of credence in any one poll, and particularly the ones that I call outliers, where you see very large differences, those are the ones we really have to scrutinize and say, what could be going on? Is it oversampling Democrats or Republicans? Have the questions been asked in a way that might be biasing the results? These are the types of things you have to think about if you're going to make any sense of this mass of numbers.
Okay, I'm going to say something here I know that has got me in a tremendous amount of trouble in the past here, Dr. Johnson, but I'm going to say it again. Is it not fair that when it comes to all of these polls, no matter whether or not you get them from NBC, CBS, Quinnipiac, whatever, it is up to the individual voter to look at them. Look where they're coming from, do a little digging, do a little research, and if you're going to use it as part of your argument, you should know where that argument is coming from and where it's based on, but we don't do that, do we?
Thank you. Well, that's right. I mean, look, there are no shortcuts when you deal with numbers. You have to actually think and engage. Something as simple, I mean, the way I was trying to explain it is, imagine what we're trying to do with these polls. We're trying to predict the voting patterns of 130 million people. Short of actually holding the election, that's a pretty hard problem, right? So if you're going to rely on 600 people or 1,000 people to try to predict those voting patterns, that's going to be a really big deal. So it's a hard question to ask. And every choice that is made by a pollster potentially affects what those outcomes are. What can you do as sort of an everyday consumer of these polls? Well, look at the fine print. See what the sample sizes are. Is it based on 500 people or 2,000 people? We talk about this notion of the margin of error. Do we think the results are within the margin of error or not? Many times people just sort of throw out the poll numbers and you literally just see Clinton ahead by 5 or Trump ahead by 1 with none of the context of whether or not it's a good poll, a bad poll, whether it's an internet poll, a phone poll. These are all things that really matter a lot.
Or whether it's a reputable organization, because quite frankly, there's a bunch of them out there that sure sound reputable, but they are not. 1-877-Newsmax. Let's get a couple of quick comments in here, Doctor, and see what the people are saying out here. Ray is in Chino, California. All right, Ray, you think the race is too close to call. We get it. But do you trust the polls? Why or why not?
I don't trust the polls. The only poll that I give credence to is the Quinnipiac poll. And that one seems to be more accurate and has been more accurate in the primaries and some of the other things. I think all these other polls, especially the Washington Post, New York Times, any of those type of liberal media outlets are biased. They're going to spin the polls in their direction, or they're going to try to spin it in their direction anyway. And they're going to come out with this thinking that Clinton is actually advancing when she's really not. I can honestly say that right now I think Trump is going to win this election. All
right. We appreciate the call. Doctor, let me come to you on this one here because Ray's point is very well taken. And specifically, let's talk about that little data. Your book is Misinformation Hidden in the Little Data every day. So with regard to all these political polls, what is that, in your opinion, that misinformation that we as voters need to be looking at and look for when we look at these polls?
Well, first we have to look at how the questions are asked. There's a whole series of polls where you'll see a series of questions that have particularly negative connotations about one or both candidates. And of course, if you're going to ask someone a negative question before you ask them how are they going to vote, that's potentially going to shape what they respond to. Now, this is an interesting election in that there are very high negatives in the polls, pretty much universally across all of the major polls, whether they swing slightly liberal or slightly Republican, that show fairly high negatives for both candidates. But when you're actually thinking about the misinformation, making sure you dig a little bit deeper. Don't just buy into the one snapshot number or the one headline, but actually think about what does it mean, treat it as what it is, one particular number out of context on a given day.
Do your homework, people. Vince is in Ocala, Florida. Vince, you think Donald Trump needs to tell people if the poll numbers don't change, he's dropping out. Why is that? And do you trust the polls? 30 seconds.
Well, I don't trust polls, but they always seem to work out for some reason. The thing is that if I were in Trump's shoes, this guy doesn't need this. This guy has got a life that people dream about. This is something he don't need. He's doing this for the country. And he's told them 100 times what he intends and what he's going to do. About how he says it is not important. It's important what he's saying. Now, if they want that traitor on a silver platter, I would hand her to them in 2 weeks if my poll numbers don't change.
All right, and they may
How I
just
feel
do that,
about
as a
it.
matter
That's
of
what
fact.
I would do if I were him.
We appreciate the call. 30 seconds, Doctor. Is there any one poll that you really, I mean, we had a caller earlier say the Quinnipiac poll, which a lot of people trust. Very briefly, is there any one poll that you look at and you seem to trust more than the others?
No, actually, sort of sticking with my theme, I actually try to look at them in their totality. I don't buy into one poll. I mean, some are known for certain biases, one direction or the other, but I generally look at a regular basis across a wide range of polls, sort of see what the numbers suggest, try to look at the strengths and weaknesses. As I said, unfortunately, what makes it difficult for consumers of polling is there is no easy answer. Even reputable organizations sometimes get it wrong.
There you go.
But what you're looking for is sort of a degree of consistency.
Do your homework, people. Come on. It's an election. The book again. EVERYDATA, the misinformation hidden in the little data you consume every day. It's a good idea. Do your research, people. Look at them all. Dr. John Johnson, thanks so much for joining us, sir. Hope to see you again. There's one thing about Donald Trump being a political outsider that no one seems to care about addressing. We will. Next, right here on The Hardline.